I am Margaret Walsh. I am 55 years old, and this is my true story from Boston. If Thomas had not pulled up that freezing February morning, with his cab lights cutting through the darkness, I would have unlocked the bakery door and walked straight into the end of my life. 14 months earlier, I stood beside my husband's hospital bed at Mass General, holding his hand as the cancer finally took him. 33 years of marriage gone in the quiet hours before dawn. Patrick had been a good man, a hard-working accountant who built a small but respected firm in Dorchester. I had worked alongside him for most of those years, handling the books, answering phones, and keeping the office running smoothly. We dreamed of retiring to a little cottage on the Cape, where we could wake up to the sound of waves instead of traffic. We never made it. The months after his diagnosis were a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy appointments, and whispered prayers that never seemed to reach far enough. Patrick faced it with the same steady calm he brought to every tax return and client meeting. He would squeeze my hand and say, "We had a good run, Maggie, a really good run." But when the end came, it still felt sudden. One moment he was there breathing beside me, and the next, the machines went quiet, and the room filled with a silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. After the funeral and the endless medical bills, there was almost nothing left. Our savings had been drained by treatments and hospital stays. The house in Savin Hill felt too big, too empty, and too full of memories that waited around every corner. I would walk into the kitchen and expect to see Patrick standing at the counter making his morning coffee. I would sit on the porch where we used to watch the neighborhood kids play and feel the weight of all the conversations we would never have again. Our son Liam lived in Seattle with his wife and young daughter. He called when he could, but grief had widened the distance between us. The phone calls grew shorter, the silences longer. I understood. Sometimes pain makes it hard to reach across the miles. I sold the house, moved into a small apartment above a used bookstore in South Boston, and decided I could not sit still with my sorrow. The walls felt like they were closing in. The nights were the worst. I needed something that forced me to get up before the sun, something that gave my hands work to do and my mind a reason to keep moving forward. So I took what little money remained after the sale and opened Patrick's Oven, a tiny bakery, on a quiet corner in Dorchester. The space was small, but full of possibility. I spent weeks cleaning painting and setting up the old ovens. I tested recipes late into the night until my back ached and my eyes burned. Fresh bread, Irish soda bread, cinnamon rolls that filled the street with warmth, scones, blueberry muffins, and hearty loaves that reminded me of the Sunday mornings Patrick and I used to share. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And in those quiet pre-dawn hours, when the city was still asleep, I felt closest to my husband. The smell of yeast and warm butter brought him back to me in small, gentle waves. I started at 4 a.m. every morning. The walk from my apartment was short, but cold, especially in winter. I would bundle up in layers and carry my keys like a lifeline. The first few weeks were exhausting. My body protested the early hours. My mind wandered to memories of Patrick, but slowly the routine became a kind of comfort. The bakery gave me purpose. The customers who started trickling in as the sun rose gave me connection, and the work kept me from drowning in what I had lost. That was where I met Thomas. He was one of the first regular customers, a cab driver in his late 50s, quiet, dependable, with kind eyes and a slight limp from an old construction injury. He drove the night shift and often stopped by around 4:30 right after I opened. At first he just bought a large coffee and a roll to go. He was polite but reserved. Then, one particularly cold morning in November, when the wind howled down the street and my fingers felt numb, even inside the bakery, he brought me a coffee too. "You look like you could use this," he said, handing me the cup through the service window. "Black with 1 sugar. Figured that's how you take it." I was surprised. "How did you know?" "I pay attention," he replied simply. "Nights and early mornings are long. We all need a little warmth." From that day on, our small ritual began. I would have a warm blueberry muffin or an everything bagel ready for him by the time he arrived. He would bring me coffee, and sometimes a newspaper folded neatly. We talked in short bursts between customers. He told me he used to work construction until his back gave out after a bad fall from scaffolding. The injury ended his days on the sites, but driving a cab let him move at his own pace and check on his elderly mother every afternoon before he tried to sleep. She was fading slowly, he said, but she still lit up when he brought her fresh bread from my shop. I told him about Patrick, about how the smell of fresh bread reminded me of Sunday mornings when he would sneak extra butter on his toast and read the sports section out loud, about how some nights the silence in my apartment felt louder than any noise. Thomas listened without interrupting. He never offered empty platitudes. He simply nodded and said, "Nights like these teach us what matters." Our conversations were never long, but they were steady, like a heartbeat in the dark. By December, Thomas had become part of my new routine. He didn't just stop for coffee. He would sometimes sit in his cab across the street during his brake engine running, keeping an eye on the quiet street while I worked inside. I thought it was kindness. I didn't realize he was already noticing things I couldn't see from behind the counter. The first time I spotted the man, it was mid-January. A gray sedan parked across the street, too early for most people. A middle-aged man in a dark coat sat behind the wheel, watching the bakery. I felt a flicker of unease, but told myself it was nothing. Boston had plenty of early risers. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or simply killing time before a shift. Thomas noticed him, too. "That guy's been here 3 mornings this week," he said one day, while I handed him his coffee. "Same car, same spot. He doesn't get out. He just watches." I shrugged, trying to sound unconcerned. "Maybe he's waiting for someone." Thomas didn't look convinced. "Maybe, but I don't like how he looks at the shop when you're inside alone." Over the next few weeks, the strange occurrences began to pile up slowly, at first, then faster. A window in the back of the bakery was tampered with. The latch appeared loose one morning, though I was sure I had checked it the night before. Small things in the office went missing. An old ledger from Patrick's firm days, a flash drive with old client files that I kept more for sentimental reasons than anything else. One morning I found the back door unlocked, even though I was certain I had locked it the night before. The deadbolt turned too easily, as if someone had been testing it. When I mentioned these things to Thomas, his face grew serious. The easy warmth in his eyes tightened into concern. "Maggie," he said quietly, using the nickname only Patrick had ever used, "I need you to be careful. Something doesn't feel right. I've seen enough late nights to know when the street is watching back." He started arriving earlier. Sometimes he would walk me inside and check the rooms before leaving. He insisted on it gently, but firmly. I brought him fresh scones, still warm from the oven. He brought me warm gloves for the walk from my apartment, and once a small thermos of soup his mother had made. Small kindnesses that made the long, cold mornings feel less lonely. Our conversations deepened. He spoke about his daughter, who lived in California, and the regrets he carried from working too many double shifts when she was young. I told him about the dreams Patrick and I shared, and how opening the bakery felt like keeping a piece of him alive. I started to look forward to Thomas's arrival each morning. His steady presence became a quiet anchor in my days. The bakery was doing well enough to pay the bills, but the early hours still weighed on me. Thomas made them lighter. He noticed when I was tired. He noticed when I seemed distracted, and he noticed the gray sedan that kept returning. The tension built gradually. I would catch glimpses of the man watching from across the street. Sometimes he held a newspaper, but his eyes were never on the pages. Other times he would drive past slowly eyes, scanning the windows of the shop. I tried to push the unease away. I told myself it was paranoia, born from grief and exhaustion. Boston was a big city full of strange routines, but deep down a small voice whispered that something was wrong. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was a bitter morning in late February, the kind of Boston cold that makes your bones ache and your breath freeze in the air. I had woken up at 3:15, bundled up against the wind, and started my usual walk to the bakery. The streets were empty. The city still slept under a blanket of frost. Thomas was supposed to be off that day, but as I approached the shop, I saw his cab already parked across the streetlights on engine running. He got out quickly and met me at the door before I could slide my key into the lock. "Maggie, don't go in," he said, his voice urgent and low. "What's wrong?" "I've been here for 20 minutes. That gray sedan is back. The man got out this time. He was at the back door trying the lock. When he saw my cab, he walked away, but he's still watching from down the block. I can see him." My heart began to race. The cold suddenly felt sharper. "Thomas, are you sure?" "I'm sure, and there's more. Last week I picked up a fare who wouldn't stop talking. He was drunk angry. He mentioned Patrick's old firm. He mentioned hidden accounts and money that disappeared years ago. He mentioned a woman who might know too much, a woman who just opened a bakery in Dorchester. He said her husband had been a problem once, and she might be one now too." I felt the ground shift beneath me. The world tilted for a moment as the pieces began to connect in my mind. Thomas continued without pausing. "I started asking around quietly after that. The man watching you, his name is Richard Harlan. He was Patrick's business partner years ago, before you joined the firm full-time. They had a falling out. I looked into it carefully. There are old rumors about missing money." The name hit me like ice water. Richard Harlan. Patrick had dissolved their partnership almost 15 years earlier after a major disagreement over finances. Patrick never gave me the full details, only that he could no longer trust the man and that some things were better left in the past. I had almost forgotten the name until now, but hearing it again brought back fragments of late-night conversations Patrick had with himself when he thought I was asleep. Whispers about accounts that didn't add up, concerns he never fully shared. Thomas didn't waste time. "We're not opening the bakery today. Get in the cab. We're going to the police right now." I hesitated only a moment. The fear in my chest told me to listen. As we drove away, I looked back and saw the gray sedan slowly pull out behind us. Thomas noticed it too. He took a deliberate route through side streets, making turns that eventually lost the tail before heading to the nearest precinct. At the police station, I told them everything I knew. Every strange occurrence, every uneasy feeling. Thomas handed over his notes, dates, times, license plate numbers, and even a few photos he had quietly taken of the gray sedan over the past weeks. The detective's expression changed when he ran the name Richard Harlan through the system. "Harlan has a history," the detective said. "Financial crimes, fraud. He's been under investigation for embezzlement from several clients, including some from your husband's old firm."
They showed me documents. Patrick had discovered irregularities years ago, money siphoned from client accounts hidden in shell companies. He had confronted Richard and forced him out of the partnership. Patrick had planned to report it, but then his health began to decline rapidly. He never finished what he started. The files I kept, the old ledger, the flash drive. They were the missing pieces Richard had been searching for. Richard Harlan had been watching me for months. He believed I had Patrick's old records, the evidence that could finally destroy him. The tampered window, the missing items, the early morning visits. It was all part of a plan to silence me and retrieve any remaining proof before I realized what I had. The police moved quickly. They set up surveillance and coordinated with federal agents. 2 days later, they caught Richard attempting to break into the bakery again in the early hours. In his car, they found copies of old client files, a burner phone, and detailed notes about my daily routine, my apartment, and my schedule. He had been planning to confront me that morning, to threaten me, or worse if necessary. When the detective told me the full story, I sat in the station and cried for the husband I had lost, and for the danger I never knew was following me all this time. The grief I thought I had begun to manage came rushing back, mixed with a deep anger at how close evil had come to my quiet mornings. The investigation widened rapidly. Richard Harlan was arrested and charged with embezzlement, attempted burglary, and stalking. Federal authorities got involved because of the scale of the fraud, over $800,000 stolen from vulnerable clients over the years. many of them elderly people who had trusted Patrick's firm with their life savings. The case made local news. People from the neighborhood reached out with support and stories of their own. Thomas stayed with me through the long weeks of statements, interviews, and court dates. He drove me to the precinct whenever I needed to go. He sat beside me in waiting rooms. He never pushed, never asked for anything in return. He simply showed up day after day with coffee or a quiet word of encouragement. His presence became a steady light in the storm. During the trial, I took the stand and spoke about the life Patrick and I had built together and how Richard had tried to destroy the truth we stood for. My voice shook at times, but I kept going. Thomas testified too. Calm and precise, he described how he had noticed the pattern over many mornings, how he refused to ignore the warning signs, and how he chose to act when it mattered most. The jury deliberated for less than a day. They found Richard Harlan guilty on all counts. He would spend many years in prison far away from the streets of Boston and the people he had hurt. After the trial, life slowly found a new rhythm. I reopened Patrick's oven with new security cameras, stronger locks, and a community that rallied around me. The bakery became busier than ever. People from the neighborhood came not just for the bread and pastries, but to support the woman who had faced down danger in the quiet hours before dawn. The smell of fresh baking still filled the street every morning, and now it carried a sense of victory, as well as remembrance. Thomas still stops by every morning. He no longer drives the night shift as often. We have breakfast together after I finish the first batch of baking, talking about everything and nothing. His mother joined us for Sunday dinner last month. She told stories about Thomas as a young man and teased him gently about finally finding someone worth slowing down for. My son Liam flew in from Seattle for a visit with his family. For the first time in years, the table felt full again. Laughter returned in small waves, filling spaces that grief had carved out. I am 56 years old now. The bakery still opens at 4 a.m. The smell of fresh bread still fills the street before sunrise. But I no longer feel alone in the dark. The mornings that once carried fear now carry hope and connection. Evil does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it hides in old business partnerships, in forgotten files, in the quiet belief that the past stays buried and that no one is watching. Kindness is rarely loud either. It is a cup of coffee on a freezing morning. It is a watchful eye across the street. It is one person choosing not to look away when they see danger approaching someone else. It is showing up again and again until trust grows strong enough to change everything. I gave a regular cab driver warm muffins and conversation on cold mornings. One freezing February morning, he refused to let me open the bakery alone. Because of that single act of attention and courage, I am still here to tell this story. This was my true story from Boston,